Smoke rises over Gaza as ceasefire talks advance after Hamas's positive response to US proposal. Iranian Foreign Ministry denies imminent US talks and cites hostile public sentiment. And Kyiv hit by Russian drone attack as both sides claim gains and exchange prisoners. Good evening and welcome to the Qnews main evening bulletin. I'm Mark Summers. Egyptian sources have indicated that Egypt and Qatar are intensifying efforts to finalize negotiations and reach an agreement regarding Gaza. The Egyptian sources added that Hamas has reportedly provided its response to the latest proposal from mediators, which opens the door for indirect negotiations aimed at establishing a ceasefire lasting 60 days upon approval. The sources affirmed that Egypt is increasing its communications and actions with all parties involved to resume these direct negotiations. They added that Egypt conducts extensive outreach to achieve a consensus acceptable to all parties. Hamas has announced that it has completed internal consultations with Palestinian factions regarding the latest proposal from mediators to halt the aggression in Gaza, submitting a positive response. Hamas expressed its readiness to immediately engage in negotiations on the implementation of this framework. A Palestinian official described Hamas's response as constructive, aiding in reaching an agreement. That comes as mediators proposed a 60-day ceasefire, which Israel accepted earlier this week, with US President Donald Trump advocating strongly for the ceasefire. Gaza-based health authorities announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has climbed to over 57,300 and over 135,900 wounded. Gaza-based health authorities have reported that Israeli military operations in Gaza had killed 70 Palestinians and injured 332 in the past 24 hours. Palestinians in Gaza held funerals after an Israeli airstrike hit a UN school, sheltering displaced families as hopes grow for a potential ceasefire announced by President Trump. The airstrike targeted the Imam el-Shafai school run by UNRWA, killing and wounding dozens. Survivors were rushed to Al-Ahli Arab Baptist Hospital. Gaza's health ministry reported 138 Palestinians killed in the last 24 hours. Israel says it aims to eliminate Hamas militants and avoid civilian casualties. Meanwhile, talks for a ceasefire appear to be progressing, with an announcement expected from President Trump. Pillars of smoke rose over Gaza as ceasefire negotiations advanced, following Hamas's positive response to a US-brokered proposal. Hamas said Friday it had responded positively to a US-mediated plan, signaling readiness to discuss a 60-day ceasefire that includes hostage releases and steps to end the conflict. President Trump described it as a final proposal and expected replies within hours. However, a Palestinian official from an allied militant group cited ongoing concerns over humanitarian aid, access through Rafah crossing to Egypt, and the timeline for Israeli troop withdrawals, highlighting the hurdles that remain. And for more on this, we cross over to our newsroom, where Reham Morsi is there for us. Reham.
Thank you, Mark. To help us analyse the current situation, we're joined from Cairo by Mohammed Mustafa Abu Shama, the director of the Strategic Forum for Thought and Dialogue. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Firstly, let's start off by asking, what are the key elements of the proposed 60-day ceasefire?
First of all, greetings to you and to the viewers. The new proposal, or the proposal under discussions these days, is a repeated version that has been tackled in several previous rounds of negotiations, but this time we seem to be approaching and very near to an end result regarding some of the principles and main pillars of a ceasefire. This one includes a 60-day ceasefire and releasing a certain number of detainees in the first 10 days. Also, 18 dead bodies will be released of the Israeli detainees. In exchange, there will be a humanitarian aid access, intensive humanitarian aid access, according to a specific timeline. Fuel and solar will be admitted into the Gaza Strip to operate the general and public facilities in Gaza. Also, the humanitarian aid related to medical supplies will be entered into the strip with sufficient amounts. Also, there is an agreement of a partial withdrawal of the Israeli troops from some regions, including the Mirage corridor and several other regions that have been occupied since March until today, to go back to before the January 18th borders. This agreement should be a step in the way to end the war. We are seeing some stumbling because there is a common concern to all parties regarding the next day to the war. But if we reach a truce or a ceasefire that is temporary, that we all hope for the Gazans populations, this will be amazing, because the bloodshed will stop and the genocide, the ongoing genocide, will cease, and therefore the humanitarian supplies will flow intensively to the strip, which will be the survival of the population from the starvation and the deteriorated health status that most facilities suffer from. Israel accepted the amendments that Hamas said a few hours ago, and they are all very simple, related to procedural stuff. They are all. We have an Israeli delegation in Doha today to finalize the negotiations, and we're all hopeful to reach positive outcomes, and for the Netanyahu's visit to be paid next Monday is very integral to conclude the deal and come up with a ceasefire that is long awaited for the Gazan population, and this might pave the way for a sustainable halt of war, which started in the October 7th, 2023, and has lasted till this moment.
Well, now, Egypt and Qatar have long been mediators during this conflict. Now, this time round, how significant is their role when it comes to the mediation process, and how can they pressure both parties into, accepting the proposal?
In fact, the diplomatic efforts exerted by Egypt and Qatar are very vital to the process. Both mediators suffered from the adamant Israeli side, which is the most difficult in this equation, because in more than one round of negotiations, we reached the final phase to actually go through with a deal, and we even approached signing a deal in last January, and we carried out the first phase, but Israel violated everything and went over everything that was agreed upon with the mediators sponsored by the United States. No doubt the Egyptian Qatari influence is somehow limited and does not match the US influence on the Israeli side and on the Netanyahu government, but they have some sort of influence whether on Hamas or Israel. We know that Egypt and Israel have a peace treaty that Israel depends upon in its national security, neutralizing the biggest and largest Arab nation in the region. And that's why Israel always is keen on keeping good relations with Egypt, and there is ongoing cooperation with Doha as well. That's why I have good relations. That's why both Egypt and Qatar have some sort of positive influence. But anyway, it's limited compared to the US because Netanyahu does not give a lot of attention to the international community or the partners, and sometimes even the United States administration. However, both mediators have some sort of influence due to the that they are neighboring countries, and we have been always concerned with the Palestinian cause as we held all the negotiations and periodic meetings among Palestinian factions. Egypt has always been for Palestinians the compass. Also, Qatar has a lot of influence on Hamas movement as it is the biggest financial supporter to the movement since establishment, and it still embraces some of its leaders. So it has the real influence on the Hamas movement.
Well, sir, as you've said there, that the Egyptian and the Qatari side have, exerted great effort when it comes to diplomacy or asserting a possible permanent ceasefire there, but the Israeli side has broken deals many times. Now, what are the main obstacles preventing a final agreement, especially regarding the humanitarian aid access in the Gaza Strip and the Israeli military presence in Gaza?
What obstacles a final agreement is the Israeli government desire and the strong votes within this government to continue the war presented in the far right ministers Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who rejected any humanitarian aid access, and they rejected any halt of aggressions. And there are many voices that support this vision inside Israel. Also, the lack of a true vision on the Israeli side regarding the next day to the war, who's going to run the Gaza Strip, will Israel withdraw or will it occupy the strip fully? We have seen a lot of statements issued by the Israeli government and military leaders, and disagreements between the military leadership and the government regarding the future of military operations and its casualties and implications on the Israeli economy. The divisions persist. Also, the US administration had only one proposal, the displacement matter, which were really testing the waters, and they were confronted by the Arab world, led by Egypt and Jordan, with complete rejection. And this rejection was supported by the Cairo summit last March, with the Egyptian Arab Islamic vision for the future of the Gaza Strip, which is the only vision possible, the only scenario possible, which wasn't completely rejected by the United States but completely rejected by Israel. Leaders of Hamas said that they do not want to govern anymore, but there are Israeli demands regarding to taking Hamas out of Gaza and disarming the movement. These are obstacles to the continuation of a truce. So of course, we're hopeful for it to be concluded, and it will not be very different compared to the truce signed last January, and it lasted only for 40 days, and it collapsed with the first real test regarding the future of Gaza and its fate, according to the Israeli vision, as they want to continue occupying the strip. The vision is still unclear so far.
Well, now, given the reports of Hamas's positive response and the U.S. administration's strong push for a ceasefire, what are the real chances of a lasting resolution beyond the 60-day period? Because we've seen ceasefires in the past that have ended and then back to, fighting again.
The chances this time is much more positive compared to previous times, as the surrounding atmosphere of this deal, whether with the Iranian-Israeli war and how it ended, or the Netanyahu's fate and his government, and the Israeli public sentiment towards the early election, as new Israeli officials are rising in the political scenes as alternative for Netanyahu, and this was stated by the US President Donald Trump as he's trying to provide a safe haven to Netanyahu and giving him impunity to the crimes he's being tried and prosecuted for. Now we are trying to fix the absurd scene Netanyahu created since the October 7th, and no one knows when will it end. Recent Trump statements says that this is the last opportunity for Netanyahu to end the war, as Netanyahu's failure in this war is now a fact for everyone. Everyone is aware of it. The objectives and goals of the war were not implemented because they were not really defined objectives and completely out of the Israeli capabilities. He wasn't even able to release the detainees, which is a mystery. No one really knows how can he not reach the detainees in the very limited area Gaza Strip, and in the meantime he was able to assassinate and target scientists in Iran, which is a huge geography compared to the Gaza Strip. He worked to completely eliminate Hamas,
Yes.
but he could never do that. He cannot go
Your
on with
point
the
there
war.
is clear, sir, that he has failed in his military objectives, so it has to end there. But thank you so much for joining us from Cairo. That was the director of the Strategic Forum for Thought and Dialogue, Mohammed Mustafa Abu Shema. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we go back to you, Mark, in our studio.
Thank you, Raham. Raham Morsi there in our newsroom. And now we go to the fallout from the conflict which involved Iran, Israel, and the United States.
We're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death.
US President Donald Trump has said that he has restored the United States' strength and respect globally, claiming that recent B-2 bomber strikes have completely erased Iran's nuclear program. During his Independence Day speech at the White House, he praised the military operation as a perfect mission. Trump also announced plans for a larger air defense system, larger than the Iron Dome. He highlighted the success of recent military operations, contrasting them with past helicopter collisions, and noted that no aircraft or personnel were lost during these missions. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson has denied reports of imminent negotiations with the United States, stating that public sentiment is currently too hostile for discussions. He condemned Israel for its recent airstrike on Evin prison, which resulted in 79 deaths, calling for accountability. That comes as Iran's deputy foreign minister emphasized the need for assurances from the United States against military action during negotiations. Meanwhile, Trump plans to discuss Iran with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu during their upcoming White House visit. The Chinese foreign minister has warned against a repeat of military conflict between Iran and Israel, stating that further use of force would lead to a wave of hatred and open the gates of hell. Speaking at a press conference in Paris, he emphasized that military action would not resolve Iran's nuclear program issues and called for peaceful solutions. The Chinese foreign minister also urged for the resolution of the Palestinian cause, highlighting the need to address Palestinian rights swiftly to ensure justice in the Islamic world. Kyiv came under Russian drone attack as both Moscow and Kyiv claimed battlefield gains and exchanged prisoners. Explosions were heard across the Ukrainian capital as air defenses engaged incoming drones. President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of launching a large-scale offensive using over 500 attack drones and missiles. Ukraine's military reported strikes on Russian positions and claimed to have repelled several assaults, destroying tanks and armored vehicles. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry announced control over 5 settlements in Kharkov and Donetsk regions, highlighting ongoing intense fighting on multiple fronts. US President Trump has said that he discussed sanctions with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is concerned about their potential imminence. These comments followed a frustrating call, as Trump called it, between the two leaders that yielded little progress in resolving the conflict with Ukraine. Trump also mentioned his conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about possibly sending Patriot missiles to Kyiv and increasing Russian airstrikes. That came after Russia launched its largest drone attack on Kyiv since the conflict began, resulting in 1 death and at least 23 injuries.
Hello, everybody.
The Russian Defense Ministry has announced the destruction of 42 Ukrainian drones within 3 hours, including 37 in the Bryansk, Kursk and Belgorod regions near the Ukrainian border. That comes as officials reported that Russian air defense units shot down numerous drones across various locations, including 2 near St. Petersburg, prompting temporary flight suspensions at Pulkovo Airport. Ukrainian forces have intensified drone attacks on Russian targets, with a recent operation dubbed Spiderweb targeting Russian bombers at multiple air bases. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that Moscow pays close attention to President Trump's comments regarding the lack of progress in Ukraine. Peskov noted that President Putin reiterated his country's commitment to achieving the goals of its military operation during a recent phone call with Trump, preferring political and diplomatic means. Earlier, a senior aide to Putin indicated that Russia will continue to address the root causes of the conflict in Ukraine, despite ongoing diplomatic stalemate. The Ukrainian military has announced on social media that its special forces targeted the Russian military airport in Borisoglepsk, damaging a bomb storage facility and a training aircraft. They suggested that additional aircraft may also have been affected. This airport serves as a primary base for Russian Su-34, Su-35S and Su-30SM aircraft. Meanwhile, the governor of the region reported that over 25 drones were destroyed in the area overnight, although he did not mention the military airport attack. Senegal's Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has called for stronger China-Africa cooperation in technology, highlighting Africa's potential for major scientific advances during his visit to China. On his first official visit as Prime Minister, Sonko toured Hangzhou, Tianjin and Beijing, meeting companies in sectors like digital economy, new energy and smart logistics. At the Tianjin port, one of the world's most advanced, he discussed Senegal's port projects and shared his vision of turning Senegal into China's strategic gateway to West Africa. Sonko believes deeper tech partnerships will help unlock Africa's scientific potential.
Ce qui se dit sur l'intelligence artificielle. Et bravo à la Chine, bravo aux inventeurs chinois.
Shanghai has opened China's first Legoland resort, drawing large crowds despite extreme summer heat warnings. Tickets sold out as visitors flocked to the world's largest Lego theme park. Tourists and residents queued in sweltering conditions today as Shanghai faced an orange high temperature alert. Temperatures in some areas exceeded 37 degrees Celsius, forcing staff to distribute water and assist overheated guests. The new Legoland resort features over 75 rides and attractions built with more than 85 million Lego bricks across 300,000 square meters. Thousands of endangered Tibetan antelopes have gathered in northwest China's Xinjiang region as their annual calving season reaches its peak. Around 30,000 pregnant Tibetan antelopes have converged at a lake in the Altun Mountains Nature Reserve, located around 5,000 meters above sea level. Researchers say more than half of the calves have already been born. Within just 30 minutes, newborn antelopes can stand, walk, and even run, allowing them to quickly adapt to their harsh environment. The mothers and calves will remain in the area until strong enough to return to their original habitats. The Tibetan antelope is a Class 1 protected species in China. And just before we go, time to recap the main headlines this evening. Smoke rises over Gaza as ceasefire talks advance after Hamas's positive response to US proposal. Iranian Foreign Ministry denies imminent US talks and cites hostile public sentiment. And Kyiv hit by Russian drone attack as both sides claim gains and exchange prisoners. Now, of course, 24 hours a day, you can visit us at Qnews EGY on our social media platforms to find out the latest news there. And thank you very much for watching this evening. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night.